What's going on, guys? Back today with the tabletop video for the Razor HD Gen 2. Now this video is coming on the heels of them just announcing the release of the Razor HD Gen 3, which is due out April 2020. Filming of this video is January 2020. So I'm sure if you're watching this video, I'm sure you heard of that announcement. I'll talk about the Gen 2 and then get into a little bit of what I know of what's going on with the Gen 3. But let's take a look at the Gen 2. Alright guys, so here it is, a close-up look of the Vortex Razor HD Gen 2. We're going to go over some of the features and all that. But what I first wanted to touch on is this particular mount. Now this mount is also from Vortex and it's got that offset. I wanted an offset style mount because if I just went with a standard, just a ring mount that would go on the pick rail, you're at the mercy of how big the pick rail is. So if I mounted it right here in the rearmost position, would put it pretty far back onto the gun and onto the stock. Now that would make that would put my head in a position that wouldn't be too comfortable, because while it's true that you get a pretty good eye relief setup on this, which means if you're new to scopes, your eye doesn't have to be very close to the lens for you to get a clear picture. You can have your eye further back and get a nice clear picture in the lens and not have that black ring. You start to see that black ring within the scope. The downside to not having a lot of eye relief and having your scope this far back, put your head very close in a normal shooting position. So if your gun has a lot of recoil like this 4570, I mean it's a bigger bore gun, so shooting a 4570 and something larger with your head that close to the optic, you're going to run the risk of when you take your shot, no matter how tight that thing is to your shoulder, this scope coming back and smacking in the face and in the eye, which isn't good. So I opted for this style mount because what that gives you, it gives you that offset where you can mount the scope all the way into the back and still have a lot more room, a lot more versatility in where you mount it. But I had it mounted here, and it brought the scope head, or the lens, forward enough that I wasn't in danger of smacking my face under recoil. So this style of mount is the mount that I would prefer on a scope. Now I don't do a lot of scope shooting, a lot of distance shooting, but this is in my opinion, the best setup for shooting scopes, that offset type mount. So with that being said, I want to talk about some of the things I talked about in the shooting video of the 4570. What you're going to get is a lot of adjustability here, making the lens clear per your eye. So what you can do is, and I'm not sure and how this is going to be for you, if I'm even going to be able to get a good shot in here of this, but it helps focus in on what you're looking at distance. So depending on how your eyes are and how good your vision is, you can adjust this to give you a better focal view of what you're looking at downrange. So that's a nice little touch. There are scopes that have that. I just like the added feature of it. So it's not like a new feature, it's just part of the feature set on this. What I don't like about this scope is how tight it is to make your adjustments from 1, 2, all the way to 6. Now I'm putting a pretty good amount of pressure on this scope to make the adjustments. But in my experience with this sort of setup, especially having this offset type mount, when you go to make your adjustments, your hands and your fingers, depending on how you adjust it, if you adjust it this way, your hands and your fingers will hit this mount. I talked about that in the shooting video. And I don't believe that Vortex makes the thumb knobs or the scope knobs, but I believe that the price point that this is, I think that they should, one, either make it, or two, most certainly include it with the package, because you're paying a lot for a scope. For them to throw in a $10 part is not a big deal. And what that does, and if you're new to scopes and you're not sure what I'm talking about, it's a little knob, and I'll throw a picture up on the screen. You can get these little scope adjustment knobs that attach onto this portion here. And then when you want to make your adjustments to zoom in, it's easy to just grab this knob and flip it from one side to the other and not have to worry about sitting there twisting, and twisting to find your right spot. And even in their video on Instagram they released of the new Gen 3, it has a knob on it, and you can tell because in the portion of the video when they go from 1 to 10, they grab this knob and you can see it sliding over to make the adjustments. Now it's yet to be seen if that scope is going to come with one of those knobs, but at that price point that the Gen 3 is coming in at, you would think it would definitely come with it. If they don't, they should include it with the package. So moving on down from there, your standard adjustments for left to right. It has letters and numbers, very tactile click, and I believe each click is a half MOA. Up here we got, of course, your up and down. One click equals 1/2 MOA. One click equals 1/2 MOA. So it does state it there clearly for you, and the same here, where nice numbers and very tactile clicks, very tactile feel. So you definitely know when you're making the adjustment. Moving over to the right side, this one is illuminated, and you can see here with these numbers, it's set up with a number, a dot, a number, a dot, a number, a dot, all the way from 1 to 11. And what that does is, you can change your brightness setting, and this thing gets very bright. I didn't use it at the range when I was shooting the 45-70. You can lock and unlock this dial. You take this and pull this out. Now, where it's at now, it's in the middle. You can turn the brightness off and keep it right next to your favorite setting. So, for example, I'm on all the way the brightest setting. That is the brightest setting, right? Now, if I didn't want to use the illumination, click it off to that one click up or down, and I'm in that off position. Then if I want my brightness setting back, right to that brightest setting that I had it set at originally. So that's a pretty cool feature, I think. And then obviously when you're done, you got it set, you just push this back in, locks it into place, and then you cannot move it. So I'm going to make sure that's all the way off, lock it back into place, and it's not moving anywhere. So some of that being said, this is a pretty hefty scope. I believe they market it or list it as like 22 ounces, something like that. It's got some heft to it, especially when you use a mount like this. Now you can get mounts like this that are pretty light. So you can get, like, I think Scaleworks makes one. Different people make these mounts that are light mounts and that are quick detach mounts. This basic one from Vortex is just your, tightening down with screws. You can definitely get better mounts. If you're going for a light package, it's not going to be a light package, but the quality is certainly there. Now, most people will say, if it's heavy, it's expensive. And if it's heavy, it's quality.
Are they heavy?
Yeah.
Then they're expensive. Put them back.
Lightweight, depending on what company you go for and what you're actually looking for, you're going to have those trade-offs. So this is heavy, but for me, that doesn't bother me. I don't mind having an extra 20 ounces on a rifle or on that hunting rifle because, again, I'm not trekking with this thing all over the place. I'm not taking it into battle. It's a great optic for hunting, for out and shooting. I'm not worried about saving a handful of ounces just on a scope. Now, this scope mounted onto my Henry, it's not heavy enough to say, man, this thing is heavy. So to me, the weight of this is not a big deal. Not a factor at all. I'm in love with the options it has. Everything about it, I love the way it's just set up. So those are all the main things that I want to talk about in this video for this scope. Now, there are some other things that other people with more knowledge than me about scopes and all that could tell you and could go into depth on, and I'm sure there's other videos on that. But for your average shooter, for somebody like me and just somebody that wants to go out there and have a good time shooting, hunting for fun, or whatever it is, you can't go wrong with this. And those other extra things you want to get into detail on will probably not be a deal breaker for whether or not you get this scope. Now, is it expensive? Sure, depending on what your definition of expensive is. But with this, it's quality. You can't go wrong with it. I own many of Vortex sights and red dots and everything and scopes. I like to stick with them because they give a lot of quality product for not that much money. I mean, something like this from other companies could be a lot more expensive. I think Vortex has always come to the market with more affordable, high quality glass, and I think that's just what they are. So I like to support Vortex. And another reason I liked this particular scope, this is the only scope that they make in this sort of bronzy type of finish. And I thought it complemented well that Henry, which is the all-weather stainless, and it had the black furniture. I just thought it complemented it well. And now I know a lot of things shouldn't be based on looks, should be function over form, but it just looked good. And a lot of people today, they want it to look good. So for example, putting this on my FDE version AR, I think it looks really good. Setting this alongside the FDE version AR, I just think it looks great. I mean, it kind of gives it that little bit of pop of color, a little bit more, little extra, and I use, some different color mags and things, and I think it looks cool. It kind of gives it that little bit of an extra, flair, if that's what you're going for. Especially, I like taking pictures and posting them on Instagram. I think this, to me, catches the eye. All black scope, every scope is black, This catches the eye and says, oh, what is that? That's a cool looking finish. And it might draw somebody in who's never seen one before or wants to buy a scope, just to buy it based on the color. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Hope you found this video somewhat informative. Again, I'm not an expert on rifle scopes, but I'm going through just the basics of this scope. And again, there's probably many other videos on this scope more in detail about more of what the glass and the kind of glass and difference between how this zooms versus how other scopes zoom. All that I don't care about because I'm just out there shooting for fun. So general overview, great scope. I don't think you can go wrong with it. So, alright guys, thanks for watching. See you next time.